In this lesson, we're going to be learning about the tuples. A tuple is an ordered collection of values or data. Unlike the lists, tuples are immutable. And what this means is that once you create a tuple, you cannot alter or modify the values. We're going to start by creating a tuple. Here we have creating tuples. To create a tuple, you enclose values or items inside of parentheses. So we can have something like nums is equal to, I'll provide a parenthesis. Inside the parentheses, I'll provide the values. So I can have something like 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is a tuple. Now take a look at this. If I have something like nums is equal to 1, 2, 3, and 4, this one is a list, while this is a tuple. And I can easily determine this using the type function. So I can have something like print type nums. I'm going to copy this and paste it below. Now, if I run the program, you can see this is a tuple and this other one is a list. Apart from enclosing values inside parentheses, you can also create a tuple by having something like nums is equal to, you can simply provide the values separated by commas. So you can have something like 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is also another way of creating tuples. Now, let me print out the nums. So here I can have print nums. Then after this declaration, I'm also going to be printing nums. So here we have print nums. If I run the program, you can see we'll have a tuple or have a tuple. So you can either create a tuple by enclosing values inside of parentheses, or you simply provide the values separated by commas. Now let's look at how we can create an empty tuple. So here we have empty tuple. To create an empty tuple, you simply provide a parenthesis. So we can have nums is equal to this. So this is an empty tuple. Now, the next one that's a bit tricky is how to create a tuple containing one value or one item. So this is tuple with one value. To do this, I can have nums is equal to, I'll provide a parenthesis, then provide a value. Looking at this, we'll simply assign this name to this value. So this is not a tuple. If you want this to be a tuple, you are going to leave a trailing comma like this. So this is how you create a tuple containing one item. Now let me quickly try out this without a trailing comma. So I can have print type nums. If I run this program, you can see we have class int. But if I provide a comma immediately after the value, then this becomes a tuple, no longer an integer. If I run this program, you can see we have class tuple. So this is how we create tuples with one value or a single item. Now let's look at how we can access elements in a tuple. Here we have accessing elements in a tuple. And just like the lists, tuples are ordered collections, which means that you access elements using their positions or indices. So we can have something like fruits is equal to, I can have orange, I can have apple, and I can have cherry. Now I'm going to be accessing the first element. So I'm going to be providing the position for the first element, which is 0. So I can have fruit is equal to fruit. Then I'm going to be using a slicing operator and then provide the index. So here I'm going to provide 0. Now I can print out the fruit. If I run this program, this is going to display orange. If I want to get the second element, I'll simply change this to 1. Then if I run the program, it is going to display apple. Then if I want the last one, I'm going to provide 2. If I run this program, it is going to give me cherry. I can as well use negative indexing, so I can use -1 to get the last item. So this is going to fetch me the last item. Now, apart from accessing elements in a tuple, I can extract a portion of a tuple. This operation is known as slicing. So if I want to get the first and the second element in this tuple, I'm going to be providing the start index. So I'm going to have 0. Then I'll provide a colon and then the stop index. So I'm going to provide 2. If I run this program, I'm going to get this tuple. So you can perform slicing operation on tuples. Now let's look at immutability of tuple. So we have immutability. And this has to do with the fact that you cannot alter or modify the content of a tuple after creating the tuple. Now let's take a look at this tuple. We have nums is equal to 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I'm going to be attempting to update or modify the values in this tuple. And just like in the case of list, if I want to modify any of the elements, I can have something like nums, then I'll provide the position or the value that I want to update. So in this case, I'm going to put 0, and I'll try to assign it to a different value. So I can have equal to 20. If I run this program, I'm going to run into an error. And as you can see, we have type error. Tuple object does not support item assignment. So once you create a tuple, you cannot update, you cannot modify the values. And this is what makes a tuple immutable. Now let's look at some of the operations that we can perform on tuples. And we're going to be starting with concatenation. So we have concatenation. And this has to do with joining 2 or more tuples to create a bigger tuple. So I can have something like nums1 is equal to 1, 2, and 3. Then I'm going to have nums2 is equal to 4, 5, and 6. If I want to join these 2 tuples together to form a bigger tuple, the operation is called concatenation. I'm joining the 2 tuples together. So here I can have nums is equal to nums1 plus nums2. Now let me print out nums. So here I can have print nums. If I run this program, and as you can see, I've been able to join the 2 tuples together. So this operation is called concatenation, and we use the plus symbol to perform the operation. Now let's look at the next operation, which is called repetition. And this has to do with repeating the values in a given tuple. And for this operation, we use the multiplication symbol, which is asterisk. Now take a look at this tuple. Here I have nums is equal to 1, 2. If I want to repeat the values in this tuple by 2, I'm going to be multiplying this tuple by 2. So here I'm going to have times 2. Now let me print out norms. Then if I run this program, you can see we have 1, 2, 1, 2. Let me comment out this. So if I run it, you can see we have 1, 2, 1, 2. I repeated it by 2. If I want to repeat it 3 times, I'm going to change this to 3. If I run this program, you can see that we have 1, 2, we have 1, 2, and we have 1, 2. So to perform repetition on tuples, you use the asterisk or the multiplication operator. Now we're going to look at how to check whether a given value is inside of a tuple. So here we're going to be checking for membership. So have membership check. And to do this, we're going to be using the in and the not in operator. So here we have this tuple. We'll have colors is equal to, we'll have red, we'll have orange, we'll have black, and we'll have white. To check whether a given color or value is inside of this tuple, I can use the in operator. So here I can have result is equal to, here I will have red in colors. Now I'm going to be printing out the result. If I run this program, I'm going to be getting true. And the reason for this is because red is inside of a tuple. If I change this to green and run the program, I'm going to be getting false because green is not in this tuple. Now, if I want to check whether green is not in the tuple, I can write green not in tuple. Then this is going to be returning true because green is not in the tuple. Now let's look at packing and unpacking of tuples. So here we have packing and unpacking. Now let's start with packing tuples. When we're talking about packing, we're talking about assigning multiple values to a given name, which is essentially what a tuples does. So we can have norms is equal to 1, 2, 3, and 4. Here we have one name. At the right, we have 4 values. In essence, we're trying to pack these values into a single name, which is norms. So this is what we refer to as packing. So we're packing values into a single name. I can as well decide to have something like A and B is equal to 1 and 2. So this is what we refer to as multiple assignment. In this case, I'm assigning A to the value 1 and I'm assigning B to the value 2. Now, if I want to print out the value associated with A, I can have print A. And this is going to give me 1. Then for the B, I can have B here. Then if I run this program, I'm going to be getting a 2. Now let's say we have something like 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I run this program, I'm going to run into an error. So we have value error. Too many values to unpack. So what this means is that the values at the right does not match the names at the left. To handle this problem, I can put an asterisk before the B. Now let me comment out this print statement. If I run the program, the error messages disappear. Now let me go ahead and print A. So here I can have print A. If I run this program, it is going to display 1. Now I'm going to print B. If I print the B, it is going to give me 2, 3, and 4. In other words, A is assigned to this value. And then because of this asterisk symbol, we're able to pack these values into this name. Now, if I have another variable C, if I run the program, because we have A, then we'll have a start variable that is asterisk plus B, then C. What happens is that this A is going to be assigned to this value. Then this C is going to be assigned to the last value. Then the remaining values are going to be packed into this name, which is B. And as such, we have 2 and 3 as B. If I change this to C, we're going to be getting a 4. And if I change this to A, we're going to be getting 1. If I include another value like 5 and run the program, A still remains 1, then C is going to be 5 this time around. Then for the B, we're going to be having 2, 3, and 4. So here I'm going to change it to B. Then if I run the program, you can see we have 2, 3, and 4. Now let's look at some of the built-in methods we can use with the tuples. So have built-in methods. So here we have the min, we'll have the max, we'll have the count, we'll have sum. As a matter of fact, we'll have many of them, but we're going to be focusing on these 4. So let's take a look at this. We'll have nums is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I want to determine the smallest value in this tuple, I'm going to be using the min. So here I can have smallest is equal to min. Then we'll provide nums. Now I can print out smallest. If I run this program, it is going to display 1. Then if I want the biggest or the largest value, I'm going to be using the max function. So here we can have largest is equal to max. Then inside of the max, I'm going to be providing the tuple, which is nums. And I can print largest. And this will display the largest value, which is 5. Now, if I want to sum up the values, I'm going to be using the sum function. So here we have total is equal to sum. Then inside of the sum, I'm going to have nums. So I'm going to print out the total. Then if I run this program, you can see total is 15. Now let's look at the count. The count allows us to count the number of occurrences of a given value in a tuple or in a list or in any sequence. So I can have something like result. Result is equal to, this time around, I'm going to have nums dot count. And I'm going to be providing the value I want to count. So I'm going to put 1 inside of the parentheses. Then let me print out the result. If I run this program, it is going to display 1. And the reason for this is because we only have one occurrence of 1 in this tuple. So if I include another 1, then run the program, I'm going to be getting 2. So if you want to determine the number of occurrence of a given value in a tuple or in a sequence, you use the count method. So this is basically how we work with the tuples in Python. Tuples are very important in Python, especially when you want to work with data that you don't want to modify with time.